Welcome to episode 19 of the G2 on 5G. It's the latest inside scoop on everything 5G. We cover 6 topics in about 15 minutes, and it's brought to you by More Insights and Strategy. I'm Will Townsend, and joining me again this week is fellow analyst Anshel Sag. So let's get started. My first topic is an announcement made by Telefonica Germany. They're partnering with Ericsson and Amazon Web Services to virtualize their 5G core. And for me, Telefonica continues to be a standout operator in Europe. They're really embracing new technology, and the benefits are obvious. There's reduced capex opportunities, and there's agility opportunities as well. And really, the agility centers on the rapid ability to deploy enterprise services, and that was referenced in the press release this week. But and it's no secret that AWS has also been very focused on enabling edge, and I've written about that in prior Forbes articles with their Wavelink platform. But I don't know if you've been following this, Anshel, but again, I think Telefonica has really taken a leadership role in Europe because, from my perspective, many of the operators there are they're focused on access and, for the most part, deploying sort of traditional infrastructure. Any comments or thoughts?
Well, I think that if you look at the way European operators are structured and the regulatory, regimes that they operate under, they are kind of forced to limit their investment because there's only so much they can get back in terms of actual customer, revenues and ARPU.
Yeah.
So I think it's smart of Telefonica. And I mean, the truth is Telefonica's proven time and time again that they're a much more innovative operator than other European operators are. And because of that, they see this as an opportunity to make revenue in a place where it doesn't exist, and create new opportunities for themselves to, make more money on a network that they, are kind of limited in terms of pricing. So, European operators can't charge for roaming, and there's a bunch of other things they can't do. Yeah. So they have to find other sources of revenue, and I think this is a good opportunity for Telefonica to squeeze more revenue out of their network.
Yeah, I mean, what's impressive to me is that they're doing sort of 2 things at once. They're sort of right-sizing their investment levels and investing in software-defined tools to do that. And then they're creating new monetization opportunities, right? And 5G inherently is more virtualized than LTE, and so I'm super impressed that they're very aggressively embracing it. I'm also super impressed with AWS because they continue to sort of reinvent themselves with respect to telco, and certainly when you look at the big operators, and Ericsson's a part of this as well. So Ericsson is supplying a lot of the software components. So let's not forget them, but let's also remember that the big infrastructure providers like the Ericssons and the Huaweis and the Nokias of the world, they've been focused on delivering telco grade cloud solutions, but obviously with AWS and their leadership as the largest cloud service provider on the planet, they're really leaning heavily into telco. And I was a part of an analyst, conference with AWS where we were briefed on, what the team is doing from a telco perspective. And I think we've talked about this on a prior podcast. They've really assembled a pretty impressive management team from all, parts of the telecommunications industry. So I expect, that, we'll see more announcements from other operators with AWS in this regard. So let's shift to your first topic this week. And the IFA conference in Berlin is going on, and you have an update on Qualcomm.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I'm not able to attend. It is in Berlin, and it's one of the first tech conferences to happen since COVID hit. And they obviously have some, they have some people there in person and some social distancing in place. But the one thing to consider is that announcements are still happening, and that 5G is not going to stop. So Qualcomm's made some pretty big announcements for 5G at IFA, even though IFA is not really a 5G show. They announced that they're going to bring 5G down to the Snapdragon 400 series. And I was actually able to ask Qualcomm's president, Cristiano Amon, where these 400 series Snapdragon chips might fit in terms of pricing of devices. And he said they expect prices of those devices to be from $125 to $250. Wow. So we'll have 5G phones as cheap as $125, which is a pretty big deal because, people have been talking about 5G being a premium only technology, but if it goes all the way down to 125, volumes of 5G phones are going to skyrocket starting next year because they're going to have these devices in market starting Q1. So it's going to be a whole year of, 4, 5, 7, or 4, 6, 7, and 8 series chips just from Qualcomm, ignoring, the MediaTek stuff and Huawei. So there's lots of opportunities there. And then they also announced the second generation 8CX compute platform, which is for PCs, but they announced a new Acer notebook, which is Acer's first 5G notebook, powered by 8CX. And they also announced a big Live Nation partnership where they're going to be partnering with Live Nation on delivering 5G to, concerts and venues and making the experience better for people who are both at the venue, but also who are watching it remotely. And I think it's a big deal because, bandwidth is a huge problem at every concert I've ever been to. And having 5G and, hopefully millimeter wave will be a massive improvement in the experience. What do you think about it?
Yeah, no, I saw your tweet on that. And the immediate thought I had was, mixed reality experiences. And I agree, like when I go to concerts, I probably go to more sporting events than concerts. And it's always frustrating because the Wi-Fi usually is pretty lousy and, your cell reception is pretty lousy.
I'm lucky. I live in San Diego. So Petco Park has more Wi-Fi and cellular APs than I think some cities do. So you can legit live stream from that stadium if you wanted to.
It's impressive, yeah, and it will be exciting, to see like what results and honestly the monetization opportunities. Not that I love giving Ticketmaster that huge convenience fee they call it, right? But you talk about people at home, maybe they're concerned given COVID is still out there, and I think people would be willing to pay some amount of money to have some sort of, enhanced, sort of experience. I mean, you can almost,
It's funny that you say that because I'm wearing my Muse shirt and I got this shirt at their concert. If you notice, it's very virtual. So the whole theme was virtual reality. And there was a whole virtual reality thing you could do at the event before you went to the concert and got your VIP seats. But I could totally see that being more of a thing that people do as a VIP experience for a show.
Yeah, I mean, physically, like when you attend, you pay an extra amount of money and you get an enhanced experience. And then for people that can't come, that don't want to come, they can have a pretty robust experience at home. So yeah, it's exciting. And to your point, on your tweet, you got to lay the pipe in there, right? You've got to have, hopefully it's millimeter wave, right? To give you that really, really fast throughput and that really, really low latency for a great experience. So,
and the capacity.
Yeah, so it'll be fun to kind of keep our eyes on that one. Let's talk about my second topic this week. And you and I have talked about this before. Boy, I tell you what, SoftBank was a high flyer, with their portfolio of companies for so long. And then, boy, they hit some bumps in the road. WeWork, that fiasco. OneWeb, they seem to have a lead on the other low orbit satellite, service providers. They're in bankruptcy. I think there are a couple of companies, including Hughes, that's done the traditional, geoterrestrial, satellite service that are trying to pick it up and revive it. But now this week, there's news that the mobile operator business of SoftBank, they're considering a divestiture, and so it's almost a 20% reduction in their overall stake in that mobile network, and it equates to raising over $12 billion. And it's no secret that their financials are in disrepair. Does this bode well long term for SoftBank? Because it seems like it's just one fire sale after another. If you remember, after the T-Mobile and Sprint merger closed, they were left with a stake in the new T-Mobile, and they look to get out of that and divest that as well. So, any thoughts on your point?
I think the WeWork situation really threw SoftBank for a loop, and doubling down. And I think they mismanaged that situation, and it's the domino that tipped the rest of them.
Sure.
So I don't really know what the situation is going to be for SoftBank moving forward. But I am very worried for them as a company. Because there's lots of competition in cellular networks. And telco is not a easy business to survive. They will be. I have a feeling that if they don't manage their debt well, and they don't, resolve some of these issues they've had, then they may become an acquisition target.
Yeah, no, it's boy. I mean, it's sort of depressing to see it. They were such a high flyer for so long, and they had that vision fund, right? And they were investing just tons and tons of
I just think there were a lot of people who also doubted the value of that, and some of them, like there were a lot of people that questioned their investments, especially like WeWork. But I would say that it's a tough situation to be in.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep an eye on that. Send them positive vibes. So let's jump into your second topic this week, and you actually want to talk about OneWeb as well, but StarLink too.
Yeah. So the reason why I want to bring up these two companies is because eventually satellite is going to become a component of 5G. I think it's already being mentioned in release 16, and there's some work being done in release 17. So
low orbit, though, right? It's low orbit satellite. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But the truth is that they want to, integrate more satellite to help with rural. And the truth is, OneWeb and StarLink are both about giving access to the internet. So I think it's going to be really interesting because SpaceX says in their most recent trials that they were able to get, quote, super low latency and speeds greater than 100 megabits per second. But they're still not as fast as what SpaceX had originally claimed for the website. But the thing is that they're not stating their latency, which is a huge weakness of satellite. So what super low what may be super low latency for satellite might not actually be super low latency for cellular. So we'll see what happens. But the reality is that they're still showing pings in the 30s, 40s, which is cellular like. But it's not necessarily ultra low for cellular.
Like sub 5 millisecond, right? Latency is that's sort of the bar for mobile.
Yeah, and this is like 4G LTE kind of latencies. But that in addition to that, OneWeb, I think just under a week ago, didn't make the radar, didn't make the cut for this podcast, but they had gotten an okay from the FCC to deploy 1,200 more satellites for their constellation. So they're not stopping, and they need those approvals to keep growing and moving, building their network out. So I think it's a positive thing, and my only concern with these satellite constellations is that some of them might become problematic for stargazing and astronomy in general. Because I've seen some photos where people took photos with the Starlinks in the way, and they completely ruin the photo. So it's a possibility, but it's just something that needs to be talked about. And all the space trash and space garbage out there too is a problem as well.
Yeah, I know you're a stargazer and you're a photographer. You're a lot younger than I am, so you probably don't remember Skylab. But the whole fear of like things falling out of the sky and crashing into homes and killing people and causing mass hysteria. It does make you think. It's like if they're launching those number of devices, and with low orbit, it's designed to be very low cost and high reuse, which is what SpaceX promises with with its whole delivery system, right? I just hope things just don't start falling out of the sky if it gets too congested up there. But anyway, it'll be interesting to see how that all kind of unfolds. So let's move to my third topic this week. And we've talked about the PAL auction. We've talked about CBRS on other podcasts. So the FCC did reveal the winners in the 3.5 gigahertz auction. And the top two bidders and top two winners, no surprise, were an incumbent operator and a new operator. So Verizon, the number there was nearly $2 billion spent on spectrum. Dish nearly spent $1 billion. And I think there's a perception out there that obviously, you know, these two operators had gaps. You know, we've talked about the layer cake, and we've talked about how powerful it is to have that low.
I think we mentioned it last week.
What's that?
I think we mentioned it last week.
I think we did, yeah. And we keep talking about T-Mobile, but they seem to be on a tear these days. But yeah, so it's no surprise that those were the results. Did you follow any of that, or did you analyze the FCC report that was released?
Yeah, I kind of got the same takeaway from it, that
yeah.
I expected Verizon and Dish to be the two biggest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the biggest concern is whether or not these licenses overlap, and whether or not they're able to get enough continuous spectrum to actually build something with enough bandwidth. Because mid-band is great, but the whole point of mid-band is getting a large enough continuous block to really get that bandwidth to customers, so you don't have to do 7 carrier aggregation. You know, so I think you want to at least get 20 megahertz blocks at the very least, if not more.
Yeah. I didn't double click into the specific details there, the depth there, but
there's too many licenses right now.
It's
to actually figure out what's what yet.
That might make an interesting podcast in the future for you and I to do some analysis on that and come back, because there were also a lot of non-operators that participated and won licenses. There were schools, there were municipalities, there were enterprises for future private, networking deployment. So it's interesting. I've called this CBRS initiative sort of the democratization of licensed spectrum, and for the first time, non-operators are given a shot. Although,
the biggest bidders were all operators.
They were, yeah, and I sort of call it, here's the FCC milking the spectrum cow again, and I want to write an article on this because, Chairman Pai, points to the success, but I mean, it is the success that the federal government raised another quadruple billions of dollars in spectrum, because it takes a lot of effort and there's a lot of cost to actually deploy these networks once you have the spectrum. So, and I think, regions like Europe, and especially in Germany, where the operators are very vocal with the governments that manage those auctions to say, hey, there should be some sort of caps here, because when you let these auctions sort of spiral out of control, and it only focuses revenue.
Because then all you get are big bidders.
Yeah, and so that's not a way to scale future 5G networks in my mind. So,
no, you're right, and I think it also comes down to the way certain things are funded in this government. But that's a different discussion. But I think that the FCC is trying to get as much funding as they can, even though I believe most of this funding goes straight to the Treasury. But I think, in this administration, I think certain divisions of the government are being evaluated based on how much money they bring in.
Yeah.
Like a business.
Given our POTUS, that would not be surprising for sure. So, well, hey, let's shift to your last topic of the week, and we're going to talk about T-Mobile. So,
so earlier this week, I think it was Monday, T-Mobile announced that they were launching 2.5 gigahertz in 85 cities or 81 cities. But if you look at the list pretty closely, it's a lot of the cities that were old Sprint 2.5 gigahertz cities. So a good example would be LA, right? LA had I think LA had 2.5 gigahertz. I just don't think I'm not sure they had it on 5G yet. Did they have 5G? I feel like they did.
They did, yeah, because I remember there was a you know, it was the old CTIA show rebranded, you know,
Right.
Mobile
Super
World Congress
mobility.
Americas, and I was on a rooftop with John Saul before the merger, and we were
Right.
talking just about this in downtown Los
So
Angeles.
yeah, so they had LA. They've got Atlanta, which we know was a T-Mobile or an AT. It was a Sprint 5G city.
Yeah.
We've got Chicago, which we already knew.
Yeah. Another
We've
Sprint
got
city.
Dallas is one of them. New York, obviously. But they had a bunch of cities in New York State, but most of them are pretty small cities. So it seems like they're still focusing on places that already had 2.5 gigahertz 5G, at least in this release.
Yeah.
But that still takes effort to switch from one network to the other. I think the big ones would be Dallas and Houston. And I think that Dallas and Houston are the two big ones that I think they're adding. And I would say that overall, it's, you know, it just is a pointing to how T-Mobile is going to continue to be aggressive with 2.5. And they're probably going to have more customers covered by 2.5 than any of their other competitors have with any other band. So I think by the end of this year, we'll probably see this number of cities double or triple.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised that they started in those metro areas where, you know, Sprint had laid out the 2.5 already, right? So you've got to start somewhere and build and spoke out, you know, from that. So yeah, well, we'll keep our eyes on not only T-Mobile but Verizon, you know, with this newly minted spectrum that they've purchased, and obviously you can't discount AT&T. They're investing very, very heavily.
Yeah, and especially now that Verizon's trying to block T-Mobile from acquiring more 600 megahertz.
Right.
It's a very interesting situation, but we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, in general, I think it's good because you know, the 2.5 gigahertz is really why they bought Sprint.
Right. Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
I think, but they also bought Sprint because they needed to balance their very consumer centric go to market with business acumen, and Sprint has definitely brought that.
I would also argue that their 2.5 gigahertz, I mean, Sprint's business would be useless with T-Mobile if they didn't have 2.5. They wouldn't have the capacity.
I completely agree. They both work together hand in hand. Well, hey, buddy, it's another great podcast this week. Why don't you take us home?
Sure. We hope that our viewers and listeners found this week's topics interesting. If anyone would like to provide us with an insight on a topic that would like for us to cover on 5G in a future podcast, please reach out to us on social media. Will is at Willtown Tech, and I'm at Anshel Sog. Thanks again, and we hope that you guys have a great weekend and tune again next week.
Happy Labor Day.